Hey folks, welcome back to Nako. This is Chris in central Pennsylvania. First off, giving it a heads up if you can hear my audio, because I want to make sure. We've had a few issues with audio with my old channel being restored. The settings got kind of worked up back and forth. So if you can hear me, give me a thumbs up and let me know you can hear me. And tonight it's just Koketso Retsani and myself. Koketso, how's it going?
Yeah, it's going good. I feel like I've been online a lot less, or at least I've been chatting to people online a lot less. So yeah,
Okay.
It's good to actually have this kind of conversation again.
Well, we haven't done this since January, since I left for my 5-week tour of South Africa. And you and I didn't get a chance to link up during the last time you came to the meet and greet, but this trip, in part because I don't know if you got the story that I was almost declared an undesirable immigrant in South Africa. Did you hear that story?
No, I've missed out on a lot. So
Okay.
yeah, I've been traveling quite a lot myself. The passport's getting full, so there's a lot I miss out on actually. What did I miss?
Well, okay, folks are saying the audio is fine. Thank you, folks. Kialabo by a donkey for letting us know that. So, yeah, this is what happened. I arrived at OR Tambo. Last time I flew straight to Cape Town. I went through Frankfurt to Cape Town because the Sevens was in Cape Town. This time, the focus was in Gauteng. I did go to Western Cape, but it was for eight days. But anyway, so I flew into Joburg, flying back there. But unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, the way it's scheduled with Delta, they wound up flying me an Airlink back to Cape Town. So I still wind up going out of Cape Town in the end. But anyway, OR Tambo is where I arrived. I went through where I've gone through hundreds of times in OR Tambo. I walk up and I'm like, Dumelara, what's Sihilijang, you know, and the guy's all impressed, you know, okay, cool. He's like very friendly, as the people usually are when you make the effort. And he said, how long are you here for? I said, well, last time in August I came for 4 weeks. This time I'm here for 5 weeks. I'll be leaving on the 28th of February. He stamped my passport and he scribbled in there. Now, I arrived in Cape Town. I got a stamp for arrival. It put the date. A stamp for visa. It put the date I had to be out, 90 days. So 2 stamps. He only put 1.
Yeah.
And I couldn't read it. It looked like it said May or March, and the numbers were scribbling. But I went and collected my bag and took off. Well, after I'd already been in the country for some time, I went to the border at Tlokwane, at Kopfontein, to cross over into Botswana on a Sunday. Took my time. I went to the Stormers and Bulls game. I covered. I had a press pass. I was a journalist in the press box, and I had a seat I paid for. Went down. It was pretty cool. Stayed in the Protea overnight. Next morning, took my time. I left. Drove up. Not in a rush. Didn't speed. Followed the speed limit. Stopped at McDonald's in Rustenburg. Topped off. Hit the road. Got to the border. And as I handed my passport over, the lady was looking strangely. She's like, So she went inside. She came back. She said, sir, you can't leave the country. I said, what's wrong? Well, you've overstayed your visa. I'm like, how can I overstay my visa? I just got here on January 27th. It's only February, 19th or something. And she goes, sir, you were supposed to leave the country on February 5th. I'm like, February 5th? That's not even 10 days. What is that all about? She said, if you leave the country, we have to stamp your passport undesirably, be banned from reentry for 5 years. I'm like, what? Now, they do this to Botswana all the time. I know this to be the case. It's nonsense. So I had to, now it's late afternoon, or not late, it's afternoon now. I have to drive all the way back to Pretoria, get back before dark. So I turned around, I drove all that way, and then I had to get a hotel, because I didn't have a hotel. I got in touch with somebody. They got me back in the hotel I'd stayed at when I'd been there a few days prior, over on the east side of Pretoria. And then I told my audience, I made a video from there. Bad, I'm trying to connect to the Botswana towers, trying to connect to South Africa towers. So I finally got through, and it's like 35 degrees. I'm pouring sweat. There's no shade. The baboons are trying to steal my phone because they're coming up there and hanging around. It was a mess. Anyway, so one of my viewers who had gone to the Sightlanders event that was in Pretoria East, she is married to an American, and the American husband had trouble with his visa in South Africa, and so she knew somebody that used to work in Home Affairs, put me in touch with that person. Everybody had a solution. Everybody wants to help, and I appreciate it, but this was the one, and it seemed like the most promising. So the woman she mentioned actually called me at midnight on a Sunday and began intervening in my case. And we got it sorted on Monday, but by the time it was done in the afternoon, I had to go all the way back to OR Tambo and then drive back. And then on Tuesday, I drove back to Botswana and got in. Instead of having 5 days in Botswana, I had basically a day and a half when I got this all sorted out.
Yeah.
Anyway, but the bottom line is that if I had not gone back to the airport and got it sorted out, I would have been an undesirable immigrant and banned from South Africa because of the either intentional or the idiotic mistake of a Home Affairs immigration official at the border. So I've gone to South Africa hundreds of times and never had this problem, but you can be guaranteed in the future, every time I get a stamp, I'm not moving away from that booth until I'm clear that I got 90-day visa on there. This is ridiculous. It happens to Zimbabweans, it happens to Namibians, it happens to Botswana quite a bit, just wrong. But anyway, so that was almost banned from South Africa for 5 years. I didn't even do anything. I didn't even sport my red beret. So there you go. I didn't even show up at the border like this. So anyway,
And I thought my problems were bad. The biggest issue I face when I have to go through immigration is, so my passport's 9 years old, so it's expiring in just over a year. So the photo on there is me 9 years ago.
It looked very different. Well, the other problem you're going to run into now is that in Africa, you always get these officials. Your passport's good till the day it expires, but usually within 3 or 6 months, a lot of African states, well, you can't enter the country because it'll expire while you're here.
Yeah.
I can only stay for 3 months. So what are you griping about? Here's my return ticket.
Yeah.
But my passport expires in 2024. I'm going to have to get a new one myself, and I'm not looking forward to that because our bureaucracy is such a pain here. I know someone just got a passport done, and they got bad information about whether it was received, when it was, and actually got emails after the fact saying, hey, it's been received today, and the person had the passport in hand. The new one had come in the mail. So anyway, Cool. But there you go. So but I spent 5 weeks as in Northwest. I did anti-poaching operations on Moletedi, the dam up there near the Northwest. I also went on neighborhood watch patrol with the AfrForum in Zeerust. Pretty cool. I didn't get to see the guys from the Forum for Democracy because they had town hall meetings and I was in Zeerust, and then I went to the town hall to try to catch him, and I literally got there 5 minutes after he left the meeting and he had to go to a township, and so we just didn't cross. But we'll take care of that next time. I was in the Free State. I went to San Luana, Rourke's Drift, Blood River, back down to Howick, interviewed Chris Pappas again, the Drakensberg, the Free State again, the Western Cape. I interviewed beekeepers because I'm a qualified beekeeper now. I went to a concert with Steve Hofmeyer. He called me up on stage and had me sing with him. It was quite an event. It was quite an eventful tour. So I don't know if your travels were that exciting, but mine were certainly exciting.
Mine were not that exciting. Got to go to Egypt. Couldn't see the pyramids because it was work. Also went to Tunisia as well. Discovered quite a bit. So drove between two cities. So capital is Tunis, or Tunus by how they pronounce it. And then drove to another city that's about 2 hours away by car. And just on the way there, I just realized that, this place looked a lot like home. Not extremely a lot, but, it reminded me of home a bit. And you look around and, I start asking the guy who was driving me, excellent guy. And he's just telling me about the history of the country and all of that. And then he starts telling me some of the primary exports, how the best olives in the world are from Tunisia, and that how they have a massive strawberry strawberry exporting industry in Tunisia as well. So the one thing I think that really stood out for me is, and I'll mention the unemployment situation in South Africa, is at some point I was back in the capital in Tunisia, so I was staying in the fancy part of town, really where all the global businesses are, etc. Nice hotel. Got an afternoon off, so I decided, let me walk around the city and, let me find some place to eat. And really, as I walk around, you start noticing some of the normal things which are actually not normal in South Africa. The fact that pretty much almost everyone has a job. So I ended up going to a pizza place, family-run business. You got a guy and his wife, and what looked, if I remember correctly, it was the guy's nephews. So two of his nephews, he's got the wife cooking in the back, tiny pizza place. They just decided this is the commercial part of town where a lot of tourists and international business people will be. So let me make a small shop and serve pizza and pasta, something that's a little bit familiar, as a way of differentiating myself, And that's how I ended up there, because after a while of eating traditional Tunisian food, delicious as it is, you start wanting something familiar. You start wanting something familiar. So I wanted the equivalent of a pepperoni pizza, although they wouldn't put pork on there. They'd put something else, of course. Yeah. So that's how I ended up there. And in the little English he knew, he just starts telling me about how, they've been operating there a while. And the whole time I'm just thinking, what's the South African excuse for really this bad unemployment rate? Because here I am sitting in a small shop that's run by a guy and his wife and two of his younger nephews. And, they get by. For most of the time I was there, I was the only guy in the shop because it was lunchtime on a weekday. But I'm pretty sure, during the week when guys knock off, they maybe stop by there. But the point I'm trying to make here is that the people running the shop, they make enough to get by, and it's honest work and it's respectable work, and there's no excuse why people back home here in SA shouldn't be able to do pretty much the exact same thing. So my synopsis here is that, sorry, my phone's ringing.
It's all right.
My synopsis here was that it may just come down to the attitude of the people. We have people that actually don't want to do anything about the situation they're in, and this perhaps explains why they are looking to a government to play the role of a father and rescue them out of the situation they are in. And unfortunately, the reality has to hit home. Someone has to, at some point, you have to realize that, I don't want to say no one's coming because that's a little bit crude, but at some point you have to take accountability for your own life, particularly if you are a man with a family. You have to shoulder that responsibility. You have an inherent built-in need or desire to provide for those around you, provide in terms of stability, provide in terms of protection, provide in terms of income, etc., etc. That need is there. Every guy will tell you this, of course, for the ladies that don't have it. And that becomes an attitude thing. And a lot of the South African men do not have that. They're the ones who are willing to, effectively, the idea of maybe being productive is to pretend to help me as I park my car, even though I didn't pay for my driver's license, so I know how to park a car.
Yeah.
That sort of menial job in some places in the world is done by old women, from what I could see. It's done by old women who've got nothing better to do, and the little they make, they can put food on the table. In this part of the world, it's done by able-bodied young men who actually don't want to sweat a little bit, if I can put it that way. And it's quite disappointing. But yeah.
Well, that's interesting. So, Tunis, j'habitais en Tunisie pendant 18 mois. J'étais stagiaire à l'école d'état-major à Bardo. Ça, c'est juste après Tunis. C'est vraiment une incroyable expérience. Les Tunisiens sont les gens très dans l'habitude de travail. C'est la chose pour le monde. Est-ce que vous avez la connaissance de l'oiseau national de Tunisie? Oui, non? I know I was saying that I lived there for 18 months and was a student at the staff college. And the Tunisians work very hard. And it's the vision of Habib Bourguiba that started in 1956 that turned this country into a middle-income country. They have a lot of problems related to the Arab Spring that have never been resolved, also to corruption in the Ben Ali family that was in place. But Tunisians, by and large, are well-educated. They're hardworking. They're respectful. They're devout people, by and large, and very conservative. But I was asking the last thing there, the oiseau national, that's the national bird. I don't know if you got a chance to see it. In French, it's called le sac plastique. The plastic bag. We call it the national bird of Tunis because everywhere you go in the olive vineyards, and the olive tree groves, there are plastic bags that have been tilled and turned up, and it's in the soil. They had a real problem with plastic bags. Maybe they've cleaned it up now, but you found Tunisia to be interesting, did you? And this is the midst of a tyranny that's actually going on there right now. The president suspended parliament illegally and has been running it as a dictatorship for 18 months now, and a lot of people are hurtful about it, but it is a peaceful country, wonderful people, and it seems like you had a very good experience. And the cultural aspects seem to be something you're questioning yourself. Why can't South Africans be like this?
Yeah, it's exactly that. And I'm almost envious, really, when I witness these sort of things. I mean, I think they said population in Tunisia was 12 million at most, somewhere there. I could be wrong on that, but yeah, it's relatively small. The land mass is relatively small, but people are still able to do something with the perceived little that they have.
Well, and speaking of perceived little, sorry to interrupt you, but they have virtually no natural resources. It's not like they have tons of oil or natural gas or diamonds or gold or bauxite. No, they have some oil, and they actually do. They're accused of horizontal drilling into the Algerian fields, which I think they're guilty of. But they don't produce enough oil for their own needs. It's like 30,000 barrels per day or something like that. So they're not an oil producer. The bottom line is they don't have natural resources. They chose to invest in human capital, which is the argument I've been making about South Africa's education since 1994. The ANC has gone the other direction and dumbed down the education system, weakened the good schools, and not improved the poor schools. I mean, when children's like that drives a religious theocracy, but people people can be Muslims
Yeah.
and be faithful and just be members of society. So it's a pretty interesting place. I'm glad you got to go. I didn't know you were going. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and again, like I mentioned, it's the little things really. The fact that in the city of Monastir, there's a science and technology university there that's literally down the road from hydroelectric power plants. So you can see the practicality of it as well. You go to school, you pick up the skill, and then you go and apply the skill up the road in a national utility that everyone benefits from, that is the generation of electricity. Things we no longer have in South Africa that the previous regime used to enforce, of course, for a limited subset of the population. But this is the sort of thing that works, and this is the sort of thing you would have hoped the current dispensation would really invest into. But yeah, like we've mentioned before, even with Dumo and Nzuzo, is that the issue I have, one of the primary issues I have with the ruling party in South Africa, besides the cater deployment, is the fact that we have experts that could provide solutions, even on a consulting or advisory basis. And in the rare instances that they do, all their advisory is practically ignored and pushed over to the side. Every single time. And what that then does is the same experts then take that advisory as an export service to elsewhere on the continent, where people welcome them with open arms, are willing to pay money to implement some of these good ideas. And you see how that can turn those countries' fortunes around with things like generation of electricity, with things like setting up a rail infrastructure, with things like sorting out, things like such as a supply chain, for example, which is very difficult in the western part of Africa, at least. These are skills that South Africans are exporting to elsewhere in the world that people value, but our own government doesn't value it.
No, in fact, they passed legislation designed to actually discourage it. I mean, you need to look no further than the French electrical generation sector and the Japanese sector, which are full of South Africans. Now, the thing about South Africa is that in the early 1990s, after the elections in 94, there were a few 100,000 South Africans that abandoned South Africa, largely white South Africans who moved to Australia, moved to New Zealand, some to the UK. After 2000, that picture and that demographic began to change. We see hundreds of thousands of black South Africans, brown South Africans who've given up on South Africa, or they can't get an opportunity because of nepotism, of corruption, or because of racism in South Africa and the policies of the government. So they're contributing their human capital elsewhere. And look, we are guilty of that here. We're not like the UK. We're not like Canary Wharf that steals all the talent to run their financial sector from Zimbabwe and from South Africa. We don't do that. We get our own talent here in New York. But we have stolen your nurses. We have got a buttload of, no pun intended there, but a whole load of South Africa. And truck drivers. We have a lot of truck drivers. They're almost all white because they can't find employment in South Africa, so they come to the U.S. and they augment our economy. So thank you for that, but you need them more than we do. Every nurse and every truck driver, every financial analyst, every insurance agent, every qualified farmer that leaves South Africa hurts a heck of a lot more than the contribution they can make to America. So all things being equal, they should be in South Africa, black, white, and brown. They shouldn't be in Auckland. They shouldn't be in Wellington. They shouldn't be in Perth. They shouldn't be in London. They shouldn't be in Harrisburg. They should be in Uppington, in Gauteng, in KZN. And it really hurts me to see people feel they need to leave their homeland because they don't have opportunity. I suspect you agree 100% with what I just said.
Yeah, make that 200%.
There you go. Such a thing exists.
Yeah, and I mean, just on that as well. So one of the things I get to experience at a professional level is, I would say, the perception of Africa as a continent. Some of the perception is that, there is a grand lack of certain skills within the continent. And, if you're not careful, you'll feel very angry at some of the sentiment you come across out there. But after a while, you actually start realizing that, perhaps the stereotype does somewhat ring true because of everything you've just mentioned. The most qualified people, of course, the thought of leaving has crossed your mind at some point or another. The thought of emigrating to somewhere in the Northern Hemisphere, be it UK, Europe, Canada, US, Japan, even Dubai, South Korea is another popular destination. So the thought of it does cross your mind. And as this emigration, as this exodus of skills or specialized skills starts to materialize more and more with each passing year, that stereotype starts to ring true with how there's a critical lack of skills. And unfortunately, what that will mean, I think still within my lifetime at the very least, is that a lot of what we used to have in the country, we're going to now start having to import from a human capital perspective. And that's going to be sad. Picture a scenario where the rail network in South Africa, which is almost completely gone, picture a scenario where it is completely gone. And now to re-establish the rail network, you now have to start importing engineers from abroad.
From China.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what's
Just
going to come
picture that
to.
scenario.
Yeah, and not just engineers. The locomotive drivers will be Chinese. The switching station people will be Chinese. Yeah, the whole thing will be Chinese. Yep. No, it's really, really sad. I mean, the brain drain is real, and it's really hurt South Africa. I mean, it's horrible when you have the institutions that can train those people, get them the experience, they try to enter the workforce, and then there's jobs, but they can't do it because of the reason I mentioned earlier, and they have to go abroad. You have wasted your national resources developing that human capital. Now someone else profits from it. That's just stupid. That's stupid.
Yeah, and there's something Vusi Tembagwayo said, I think it was last week or a couple of weeks ago, where he was saying that the most stupid thing he comes across when people when people just have casual conversation is when they say things like, oh no, those who want to leave must leave. Of course, they'd be inferring that white people must leave so they can leave the country to black people, etc., etc. And Vusi Tembagwayo then makes the analogy that we have a scenario where you've got someone who's been educated by the South African government, 12 years of school, and then they go ahead and do a university qualification, for example. Maybe that's another, 3, 4, 5 years of school. If it's a postgraduate, easily that. So after 22, 23 years in some instances of the South African government subsidizing their education, you then tell that person who is completely and fully qualified to go out there into the workforce, you then tell that person, although they must leave.
Yeah.
Because of the color of their skin.
It's just stupid.
It is, for like really in the simplest form, it is absolutely stupid.
Yeah.
And Tembagwayo said this, and lo and behold, people took offense, but he was right. And
yeah, no, it's people taking offense and aren't very bright. That's the thing. They're not very bright. Look, people, let's just deal with this thing very quickly here. A lot of white South Africans will give up in South Africa, and a lot would leave right now, except they're too old. They can't go somewhere else, and some are young or trying to leave. But the Afrikaners aren't leaving. They are not going anywhere. Yeah. So you need to get over yourselves if you're a racist and don't like white South Africans, because the Afrikaners, some will leave, but as a people, they are not leaving South Africa. So you need to come to an accommodation or at least coexistence with these folks. And if they're not harming you and you're not harming them, then maybe that's the best outcome you have. But the bottom line is that the Afrikaners are of African soil. That's how they feel about themselves. Yeah. That's who they are. That's their identity. And the last thing you can strip from somebody is their identity. You can try and you can succeed, but that's the last thing you get away from. You can take their property, you can imprison people, you can deny them rights and civil liberties, you can herd them into concentration camps, but all that does is reinforce an identity. So people need to get over it. It's just like the Nguni speaking peoples. They're not leaving South Africa. They are of South Africa now. Even though they just arrived 1,600 years ago, they are of South Africa. So people need to get over themselves. And in fact, for something I didn't know for a long time, there's actually a small ethnic Chinese population that came 100 years ago to South Africa. They're part of the country, folks. It's part of the fabric. You have to deal with it and just work together. So anyway, and somebody wrote Ubuntu. Yeah, if only there was Ubuntu. That'd be nice, wouldn't it? Yeah, that's a separate conversation, I guess. But yeah, this whole concept of Ubuntu, I think it's very misunderstood. Yeah.
But I would challenge anyone to go out there and find whatever codified literature you can that can explain Ubuntu.
Yeah,
because people always present it as an idea. So I'm challenging anyone to actually.
Right. To me, it's this. To this person, it's that. Yeah, that's why I said. That's why I was saying if only. Shavesh asked me if I've ever been to Orania. No, I've never been to Orania, Shavesh, but I have researched it, and I've also interviewed Yusuf Saidam, who is the CEO of Orania, because it's a corporate entity. For those who don't know. I don't know why people always ask that question, why I've ever been to Orania. My American audience always looks at Orania like it's something special. Listen, I don't want to live in the Northern Cape in the middle of nowhere in the middle of freaking desert.
Yeah.
I appreciate what they're up to, and I wish them well, and I have nothing against them. They seem like good people, and they're lied about all the time, particularly by people like Julius Malema.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you want me to live in an isolated people of my own community settlement, I'm going to occupy Somerset West. I'm just saying, not Orania.
Look, there's a mysticism to Orania.
That's the right word. That's the right word. Mysticism. Yep.
Yeah, there's a big mysticism around it. From ordinary South Africans, of course. I've never been there. I've only been to the Northern Cape maybe twice in my life. So I've never been there. But I mean, with that said, I'm just waiting to see what exactly is going to happen. I don't know what the population is in Orania, but I'm pretty sure it's less than 100,000.
Oh no, it's just a couple thousand. That's it. Yeah, it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to know what's going to happen. I want to see what's going to happen when the population does reach 100,000 and they are able to completely sustain themselves in every imaginable way. They can already do this agriculturally, of course, but I'm talking now literally where they reach the status or the pseudo status of country within a country. Complete with their own means to protect themselves fully. So I want to know what's going to happen there, and it'll be quite interesting to watch. For those who don't know me that well, I'm a big one of my core beliefs, and I've said this for years, is that South Africa is simply too big. We are too diverse to be this size. Not every place can work in the way the United States does, but even then, that's a federalized state. We don't have that here.
Yeah.
So, by my honest belief, we are too big. We should have been split into 4, 5, 6 different countries where cultural identity can be at the forefront of how you govern yourselves. If you want a king and a prime minister in your smaller country, go ahead and do that. If you want to legalize certain laws, you can go ahead and do that. If in your culture you believe in polygamy, but in some other cultures it's not, then in your country you can go ahead and have polygamous laws, and in the other ones they don't have to have polygamous laws. My younger sister is actually a high school teacher. We were just talking about how school has changed between the time me and her were in high school. We're only 2 years apart, so yeah, we're just talking about how when me and her were in high school or over a decade ago, how things have changed to what things look like even now. Now she's in private education, but in public schools, I was talking to someone from church who was telling me that they've taken out the elements of prayer from school assemblies in many public schools now. Because we have a constitution that tries to please everybody. At the very least, you don't have to believe, of course, and the Constitution doesn't force you to sing along to a religious song you may not have to agree with. But there's an element of discipline that, the school prayer does in the morning in assembly. Same thing goes for the songs. There's lessons in there that are instilled in the children at the very least.
Whether they're people of faith or not, it's a useful lesson for kids.
Precisely that. And then my joke around this was that, when I was in 7th grade, which is in Gauteng at the very least, that's the last year you are in primary school before you head off straight into high school, what is referred to as secondary school in some areas. But that's about the age where you start hitting puberty. And I specifically remember we would sing those songs very loudly in 7th grade as a means of accelerating the process to break your voice.
Okay, now that's an interesting technique. Like maybe I should have done that. That would have helped me.
Yeah, this is some of the unknown things, of course. But as we were all singing Kumbaya, as a guy, you needed to have the deeper voice to sing Kumbaya. So funny as it was just a way of also building social relationships and differentiating men from women, or let me say girls from boys. But even that's under scrutiny nowadays.
We're not even allowed to do that anymore. So it might be a microaggression. But before we lose, because we're going to lose Shavesh's battery's dying before he leaves. Listen, folks, you're listening to Nako here on Colonel Chris Wyatt channel here on YouTube with my co-host here, Koketso Retsane. He is with me tonight. The rest of the team is not here. I got a question for you because you do the Man Patria thing, and that's with Dumo Denga. Dumo is out of action for a while now. So are you doing Man Patria solo, or it's still happening, or what's going on with Man Patria?
Yeah, I think we took a collective break. There was just a lot going on, even in our day jobs. So yeah, I started a new role. That's why I've been traveling quite a bit. Dumo's workload, I think, is stacking up. Same applies for Nzuzo. He's an attorney for those that don't know. So I think he's just gotten to that point where you go from, yeah, I forget what you call it, but you do your basic articles, etc. Then you get your actual admittance into the bar, and then life gets a little bit busier. So yeah, we are on a bit of a break. We should be back in a couple of months though, when
Okay,
things have quietened down.
cool. No, I
Yeah,
just want to
but
make
do
sure
head over
people.
to the
Yeah, I want to make sure
yeah,
people
so
know
that
that. Yeah,
people
so
know.
good. Tell them about Manpatria, where they can go.
Yeah, you can go to manpatria.com. There's some articles, some recent ones on there, as well as all of our historical work, or most of our historical work, especially for the Patreons as well. So do feel free to jump on manpatria.com. Yes, the website is still live, and yes, the three of us are still alive.
Yeah, I hadn't seen Nzuzo since he came on the show for that first time back in January. We had a full house.
Yeah.
That was pretty exciting with a full house. But yeah, so there you go. Check it out, folks. And look, if you're not a subscriber to this channel, why don't you become one? Hit that subscription button right below this video and become a subscriber. It costs you nothing at all. By the way, Koketso, before we get away from this, I don't think you're aware of it. I mean, you know that, of course, that my original channel, dating from 2006, was censored and removed from YouTube. I don't know if you know,
Yeah.
but a week and a half ago, I took one more stab at an appeal, my third attempt. The first was immediate. They told me to footsec, that I broke the rules, even though I didn't. And then 6 months later, I appealed, and they said, oh, it's been too long. I'm like, no way. It's all sitting in your server. All these channels are still there. And then because they gave Trump his channel back last month, I said, let me try one more time because it's been 26 months. So I appealed and made my argument that I didn't break the rules, and also that it isn't overage because it's there. They said we agree and restored my channel. Now, somehow, even though no one can access the channel and you can't see the channel to remove your subscriber base, I lost 2,000 subscribers in the 23 months that I was in the gulag. So I came back with 21,136 subscribers, jumped up to almost 21,200, and each day they're taking off subscribers. So I'm still over 21,000. So my original channel, and what I did is, in the interim time, YouTube came up with this, you have a handle, not just that long, 35 character URL to find your channel.
Yeah.
So this channel is at Colonel Chris Wyatt, so people can find easily. The other channel, I took a page out of Donald Trump's playbook on Twitter, and I put at real Chris Wyatt. So if you want to find the other channel, it's at real Chris Wyatt, folks. Anyway, did you hear about my channel coming back, or is this the first time you're hearing it?
No, I heard about it. Yeah, while I was in Europe or something. No, sorry, I'm lying. I heard about it last week. Yeah,
Okay.
so it came out in one of the groups actually. So yeah, didn't get a chance to respond, but I did hear about it. So I need to actually go back and subscribe to that channel. So
Well, I appreciate
yeah,
that. Thanks. Yeah, cool beans. I got to get every subscription I can so that the ones they take away every day don't make me get smaller.
but yeah, I guess it's congratulations for getting your channel back. And yeah, I'm just waiting for some good soul out there to actually put down a book where they really do cover a lot of what big tech has been doing, because I believe maybe you getting your channel back is really part of the consequences of the Twitter files coming out.
Oh, it is. It is.
Which,
Absolutely. I guarantee it. Yep. Yeah,
yeah,
I
which
give all
again,
all the credit to Elon Musk for confirming with evidentiary information what we all suspected that was needed, and that's not opened the floodgates, but it's certainly changed things. But it doesn't mean censorship's dead. I mean, someone who posted something the other day on Twitter, which was perfectly legitimate, had their account removed. I was live streaming the arraignment of Donald Trump yesterday on YouTube, and someone suggested I put on my TikTok channel. I went on TikTok. All I did was say Donald Trump arrived at 2:20. I was on for like 15 minutes on TikTok before I was on 3 hours on YouTube, and they shut me down. Trolls, false reported misinformation. I'm like, Donald Trump is reported. It's 2:28. He's going into the arraignment. The purpose of this is they're going to be here. The charges are going to be read to him. His attorneys have a chance to respond. The judge is here, and boom, you no longer have live streaming privileges because misinformation. What the heck is that? So it's still alive, but the Twitter files have, I'm not going to say been a game changer yet, but they've put a huge crack in the wall of leftist censorship, and we'll see where it goes from here.
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a big scaling back of the censorship that the left-enabled tech media, especially, were really engaging in. So yeah, I'm just waiting for someone to put out a book where they can go into this into more detail. I just finished the book Rigged by, I forget her name now. Molly Hemingway.
Yeah,
or
she's
something.
a Fox
Yeah,
reporter, Molly Hemingway. She's a very good journalist. I have the book right behind me. In fact,
yeah,
is it on this side or that side? One of these sides, I have it. Maybe it's over there.
yeah.
Looking there, it is right there. Hang on.
It's the yellow one. Yeah.
That's it right there. How the media, big tech, and the Democrats seized, and I won't finish the sentence because I'll get banned on this channel. But yeah, there's Molly Hemingway. She's very talented.
Yeah.
So what did you think of the book?
Yeah, excellent book. Excellent book. So with books like this, I usually buy them twice. I first get the audiobook, and maybe if after 2-3 hours I decide that no, this is too good, I'll typically get a physical or a Kindle copy as well. So yeah, I've got a Kindle copy and I've got the audiobook, which I listen to first, and then I go back and reread it on Kindle, put in some highlights, of course. Excellent book, very informative, but also I think it gives some very solid insight into the playbook of the relationship between the Democrats and big tech and how they really do go after their opponents. So this is exactly the kind of book I enjoy reading. Some of you have heard me say that I don't read fiction works at all. Yeah, I pretty much can't. My imagination's big enough already. So I'm waiting for someone maybe to write a very similar book to Molly's book regarding big tech and censorship, really. With not with the specific focus on the election, of course, but just in general. This should include not just elections, but also also the WHO. Over and above that, also some other organizations which were parachuted to the forefront, your BLMs and the like. So. Yeah, someone's probably writing that book right now. So I'm just waiting for that to publish. And then, yeah, I'll go ahead and read some of that so I can get a little bit more information. And this is why I end up in Twitter arguments pretty much on a weekly basis, whether I'm in the country or not. So,
well,
yeah,
the good news about Twitter arguments is that you can actually have them now, for the most part, without the risk of just losing your account being falsely reported. Most part. It still happens, but it's not like it was in the day.
Yeah.
Back in the day, you just had to cower. You couldn't even respond to people. Boom, you're shut down because they would falsely report you. But that is less prevalent, although it still exists on Twitter. Yeah, so, no, I mean, this is an incredible book. It didn't get a lot of fanfare, which is unfortunate because this is well-researched. It's very accurate, and she also wrote another one, bestseller, before that, Justice on Trial. Now, the way you deal with books is very different than me. I'm old school. I have to have that tactile experience, and I'll take a risk of buying a book that sucks. I just won't finish reading it, but I got to have it. I will only buy a book audio if like someone who has a cool voice is narrating it and it's a book that I really love. Yeah. So, but I don't do many audiobooks, even though I travel a lot. I prefer that tactile experience. So, which is a problem. It means my suitcases are full of books every time I come back from South Africa, and I got to make sure I don't go over 23 kgs in those bags.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah, that's exactly how I ended up on the audiobook thing because I just can't carry too many things.
Yeah, no, I got you 100%. So you went to Egypt as well, and you didn't get to go to the pyramids. That sucks. I've never been to Egypt. I've been on the border in Sinai, but that's as close as I've been. Nowhere near the pyramids.
Yeah. Yeah, so fascinating place. So I was in Cairo this time, my second time in Egypt this year. So I was in Cairo this time. Very big city. I still can't just comprehend how big the city is. I'm starting to decide between Cairo and Rio. I don't know which is bigger actually, because I've been to both now. But yeah, I think Cairo is just massive, and big cities, they have big city problems. So again, as I was being driven around, etc., one of the things I started realizing is no one knows how to drive fast in Egypt. And that's a consequence of there being so many people in Cairo. I'm not saying Egypt, but in Cairo. And that's because there's so many people, it means there's always traffic.
Yeah. Any time of day, any time of night.
Yeah, so quite legitimately, you have people who have never driven fast and don't know how to. So even when the road, in the rare instance, does clear up, they still don't know how to drive beyond a certain speed. They're not comfortable doing it because 99% of the time you are surrounded by cars on every single side. So yeah, very fascinating place. Got to walk through the city as well. So spent about an hour on foot in the middle of Cairo. Went past one of the places where the protest for the Arab Spring was really at the centerfold in Cairo as well. Yeah, it was just something to behold, honestly. Did a lot in there. Again, it was a work trip, but unfortunately didn't really get up close to one of the pyramids at the very least, or even visit one of the museums. Egyptology for me is just one of those things that really fascinates me. Everything from the religion to the writings to how the Egyptians lost their language, lost their ability over time to even read their own hieroglyphics, and really required archaeologists from Europe, generations later to come back, discover the Rosetta Stone, and then retranslate some of their ancestors' writings. Yeah, really fascinating stuff for me. So yeah, on my next trip to Egypt, I think I need to find a way to, at the very least, visit visit a museum. The pyramids can wait. I just really want to soak in a lot of that. But yeah, very interesting place. Big city, lots of people. I was hearing numbers like 40 million people in Cairo alone. That's 2/3 of South Africa in one city. That's how big the city and that's how packed it is. So yeah, you can just imagine.
It's just absolutely crazy. The thing for me, the Egyptology thing you're talking about, I always find that fascinating too. What I also find fascinating is the ignorance of people about Egypt and what it is and what it was. I mean, people look at Egypt and they look at Arabs today. That's not the history of Egypt. That became part of the history of Egypt. But I mean, you had Egyptian empire that was Egyptian from the original inhabitants of the area, and then you had it overtaken by Sudanese who ran dynasties for a long time there, and then Greeks came and took over. And so it's been I mean, if you want to look at it this way, it's been a black, white, and brown dynasty. Egyptians were black, white, and brown, and the history of it is fascinating. And then, of course, then it was conquered by the French later on, but that was a very short period of time. The Egyptians, for thousands of years, were there ruling that place. But it's fascinating. And you have people try to appropriate the history and like, Egypt, all the accomplishments in Egypt were accomplished by black Africans. Many were, but that was just one period in ancient Egyptian history. You had the Egyptians, and you had the Sudanese, and then you had the Greeks, and then you had the Arabs that came later. It's quite a mishmash, but all of it is fascinating, and the way that their religion worked and their engineering was unparalleled for the time they were in. They were amazing, and their agricultural techniques were so advanced too. Really amazing stuff. I don't get excited about the mummies. I mean, but the rest of it's the rest, or their affection for cats. I mean, that's a little too far for me. But other than that, it's a fascinating story. So pretty cool. Maybe you'll get the pyramids sometime. But like you said, maybe the museum is more interesting to get to next time.
Yeah, definitely. And I've been to Aswan as well. So that's further south. Yeah, it's south on the geographic map, but technically, or more accurately, it's further up the Nile. And yeah, I got a little bit of the history there. So that was a Nubian empire. So the Nubians would be the Sudanese-looking dark-skinned people.
That's what I'm talking about. The Nubians, Yep.
Yeah, now that was a whole separate empire, which was again conquered many times over by various pharaohs. And you can just imagine again how the Nubian people have lost a lot of their history from being on the losing end of multiple wars, of course. So you can see this in the people when they tell you some of it, that even to this day, it still affects them. And having the South African perspective, of course, we know better than anyone what apartheid can do over time. But listening to some of the Nubians describe their history, I almost got almost the same sense of displacement that Black South Africans at large have. And it was really touching to hear them really talk about how, they were here on their own, conquered by the Arabs. Then again, when that happens is you typically have imposed upon you a new culture, a new language, a new way of living,
colonization. The Arabic colonization of North Africa and East Africa.
Yeah. And this is the sort of stuff that the average South African does not know. And again, one of the reasons I'm always arguing with people on Twitter is, there are people who believe that Black people or even Black South Africa, or let me say Black Africans, are exclusively the only people to have been oppressed by those who came from far. Sometimes the oppressors didn't come from far. They came literally in, in the Nubian case.
Right next door. Yeah.
Yeah, right next door across the Red Sea, for instance, or from the other side of the continent. So, yeah, that's really some of the context that a lot of people do lack. It's like what a lot of the African Americans think right now. How many people think that slavery was exclusively the domain of the Americas, where you had white Europeans going into Africa, putting people on ships and then sailing across the ocean. They have no idea that slavery even predates by over 1,000 years.
1,000 years, West African slave trade was going on for 1,000 years before Europeans were going to go, oh, they want to sell us people? Cool. Somebody can cut the sugar cane in Cuba. That's nice. We'll take advantage of this. Africans.
Or that the word slave comes from East Europe.
East Europe, Slavs, because the Huns, the Golden Horde, enslaved Europeans. The original slaves with the term, I mean, not the original slaves in humanity, but the original slaves with the term derived from were Europeans. Yeah, and more white Europeans have been subjected to slavery than the total number of Africans ever in the history, but that's not talked about. And 75 million people currently live in slavery, indentured servitude, or outright slavery, sexual slavery, and labor slavery throughout the world today, everywhere. In Gauteng, in Harrisburg, there are people in sexual slavery, and it happens to white people, brown people, and black people. It happens all over. The ignorance kills me. I was teaching for Berlitz, and they had a contract. I think I've been called back because the contract got suspended because everything started focusing on Russia and they canceled all their courses. But I haven't heard from them in a bit. And I always wonder if maybe it was because the last class that I taught, there were a couple of students whose feelings were hurt when I told the history of slavery, because we're talking about Africa and I talked about the slave trade. But I talked about the West African slave trade for 1,000 years, where Arabs bought Africans as slaves and took them into the North African Middle East. And then I talked about the East African slave trade, where Arabs established Zanzibar to bring slaves in from East Africa. And that's how Swahili became a lingua franca and adopted a lot of Arabic, because there were people selling slaves to the Arabs and they had to find a lingua franca, and Swahili changed. And it's an African language, but it picks up a lot of Arabic. And then eventually I got to the Atlantic slave trade, and I think a couple people's feelings were hurt because it ruined their worldview. They were unwilling to accept the truth. I mean, honestly, and they probably complained about the course. That was my suspicion. Well, that guy's just a racist. We're not going to take this class anymore. We didn't like this class, And those things affect whether you get called back, I suspect. I don't know that's true, but I suspect it's the case. But listen, if people can't deal with the facts, then I'm sorry. It's like in the Deep South, and people always, when you do this, like you're an apologist. I'm not apologizing. Slavery is an abomination. It's evil.
Yeah.
It's certainly not something Christians should ever do, or Muslims or Jews. It's not acceptable. But they always act like you're an apologist. Like, for instance, if I were to tell people that of the 9 million people living in the South, the southern states that seceded from the Union, less than 3% were slave owners. Now, that 3%, mostly slave owners were men, overwhelmingly. So let's say about 5 or 6% of men in the South owned slaves. Yet we're told that the South fought the war to preserve slavery. Yes, many people did, and it was one reason why they seceded, because they were worried they were going to lose the right to own slaves. But most people didn't profit from it or weren't involved in it. They fought for, at the time, something idea that was bigger than the nation. At that time, most of the states, people identified as a Pennsylvanian, as a Virginian, as a Carolinian, as a Georgian, as a New Yorker, more than they identified as an American. The American identity wasn't fully formed even 60, 70 years after independence. It was still forming. And these people, like Robert E. Lee, he was in the U.S. Army. He resigned to defend Virginia, and that's what he said, not to defend slavery. Anyway, but whatever. But that doesn't make you an apologist; it just makes you an accurate historian. People can't accept that.
I pretty much credit 2 people with red pilling me, if I can use that term.
Okay.
I think I've told you this. The first is Aaron Magruder, cartoonist and writer. Made a TV show called The Boondocks, which focused on a black family living in the suburbs. And he would really play on some of the stereotypes regarding black people. And what most didn't realize is he was actually holding up a mirror to expose a lot of the ignorance. And some of it even touched on the Obama presidency, because the cartoon series was still relatively new when Obama became president. And in one very good episode, he just shows how no one knew a single thing about Obama's policies. They just voted for the guy because he's black. But I digress. So that's the first guy, Aaron Magruder. The second has to be Dennis Prager.
Oh, he's brilliant. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
one of the things Prager said was that I think he has a video on this on his platform, Prager University, where he says, why is it that, we are basically arguing against the wall when we argue with our ideological opponents? And he outright says that the biggest reason is simply because we know more. And it's that knowledge advantage that we have that really shapes our worldview. And the reason we know more is, like you've just mentioned, you are aware of certain parts of very important history that a lot on the other side of the ideology, they have no clue about. And so when you mention it to them with academic authority in your case, it changes their worldview. And instead of them receiving it as they would with any other piece of new information, they then decide that this is an affront on their belief and this is discriminatory, aka this is racist, aka
It threatens their worldview.
AKA you should be cancelled or you shouldn't be given a platform.
No, it threatens their worldview. That's the bottom line. Again, like I voted for Donald Trump in 2016, holding my nose, but I didn't have another option. Hillary Clinton, I was a counterintelligence agent. I followed federal law. I investigated and got warrants and arrested people who violated our Espionage Act, like Hillary Clinton. She violated. Yeah. She should have been arrested. There's no question about it. I can't knowingly vote for her. That alone.
The server issue alone was enough to say you shouldn't even be running.
Right. The judgment alone, that she would do that, a private firm. It shows you the callous disregard for the security of this nation and the lives of our men and women in uniform who are put in jeopardy by the compromise she made. I mean, in order for her to have top secret, sensitive, compartmented imagery, which is what she had on that server, someone had to enter a State Department sensitive compartment information facility, which requires an extensive background check and a clearance and a polygraph. Normally, you go in and you have a badge. You have to take a device like a thumb drive, go into a computer that's supposed to be disabled. Now, to be fair to the State Department, their IT people are not very good. I've worked with them all over Africa. I've been in embassies where the thumb drive is supposed to be disabled, but it's not because they haven't bothered. Right. They get new computers in. They don't go and do what they're supposed to. So someone had to go into a top secret facility, stick one of these into the drive because there's no CD drives. They got rid of those. Copy the data. First off, carrying this in there is a felony. Putting it in a machine is a second felony. Copying files to it is a third felony. Removing it's a fourth felony. Walking out of the building is a fifth felony. Then transmitting it. Carrying it is a sixth felony. Then putting it and giving it to someone is a seventh felony. Loading it, the list goes on and on. So I voted for Trump, holding my nose. But I was clear, I don't like him. He's a cad, he's a bully, he's disrespectful, he's rude. But in the second election, I voted for him wholeheartedly. Not because I liked Donald Trump, but because I liked his policies and the results. But these people, you threaten their worldview and they cannot handle it. They become psychotic, absolutely psychotic. It's crazy.
Yeah, they turn into, well, what's that mythical creature that, when they look at you, you turn into stone?
Oh, that's Methuselah. She's got snakes for her hair.
Yeah. They think you're one of those because every time they have to look at you, they feel petrified. They absolutely feel petrified.
Exactly. They become petrified. So Eddie Nell asked a question. He said, Chris, did the Bantu states, in other words, the Bantustans under apartheid, not in part have the aim of allowing tribes to maintain their heritage and culture? Is urbanization not more to blame for the loss of culture? Let me address that and I'll get your thoughts on it. Okay, Koketso? So my address. Yeah. Okay. So, all right. The Bantu states were created by the government to perpetuate the myth that separate development was what they were really about. Now, I'm not going to say that Hendrik Verwoerd was really in favor of separate development or he was a racist. That's an argument we can have for days on end, and I don't really care. It's not important to this conversation. But the Bantustans that developed in the 1980s, in my view, my estimation, my experience, were simply created to create the fiction that separate development is what the government was all about, when it wasn't really about that. And also a second aspect of it was to relieve pressure because they were under a lot of pressure after Sharpeville, even more pressure after Soweto in 76, and in 85 it was out of control pressure. It took them 9 months to quell Soweto in 1985. So all of that to me was an effort to just perpetuate a myth and to take some pressure off the government. Go, look, these black folks, they live wonderful in Bophuthatswana. Never mind, if you go a kilometer, you're back in South Africa. You're the other kilometer across the street, you're back in Bophuthatswana. Who could govern a country like that? Even Lucas Mangope couldn't cover that. Anyway, but the point is that that's what that was to me. Now, there may have been some legitimate people in, like maybe General Holomisa and the Transkei and others in the Ciskei and in Venda who wanted separate development and wanted to care for their people. That may have been there, but that's not the prima facie, that's not the raison d'etre, the reason for existing, what it's all about. They existed as an excuse for the apartheid government, in my view. As far as urbanization, blaming for loss of culture, yes, traditional culture suffers potentially, sometimes catastrophically and fatally, from urbanization. True story. But many people retain their traditional culture even in urban settings. It's a question of how important it is to you and your progeny. Yeah. Koketso is a man of faith. If I'm wrong, correct me, Koketso. You're a man of faith. And that's not because you magically achieved that. It's because your parents, your mom in particular, I suspect, inculcated that and made that important to you and shared that with you. And that's why you've retained it. And you've lived in the rural areas. You've also lived in urbanization. So you can retain those things in an urban setting. It's more difficult, but it's possible. And let me give an example of two groups of people in America, and then I'll Koketso get in here. Two groups of people who have inculcated their progeny and retained their cultural identity, their language, their faith, and their community for over 400 years. You ready for this? The Amish and the Mennonites. These people came from southwestern Germany and Switzerland, German speakers who came here because they were being persecuted as religious Christian Protestants. They came here, they retained their German language, they retained their culture, their method of doing things, and despite the fact we live in the 21st century, many Amish still eschew modern conveniences like cars and telephones and things like that. The Mennonites have adopted them by and large, but they still dress the same fashion, they still go to church, they're still a community. And another group of people in America are the old Spanish families of New Mexico and San Antonio in particular. These are Spanish, not Mexicans, Spanish, who came to the New World, settled in those areas, reproduced in their own community. They still speak language, English, even though they've been part of America for almost over a century and a half now. Spanish is a language in those communities. They're Roman Catholics. They're part of America, but they have the unique cultural traits. You can do it, but it has to be important to your culture and strong enough of an attachment that people want to hold on to it. Koketso, I'll give you a chance to jump in here on the Bantu stands and on culture and urbanization. Go ahead. You got the floor.
Yeah, so I think my belief on the Bantu stands was that, given the demographic context of minority having control over a landmass where they are a clear minority, largely outnumbered, I think it was done for administrative purposes. You almost want to send what the Romans, almost like exactly what the Romans would do. You've got your Caesar, aka your emperor, but you need to deploy prefects and governors to your various territories to maintain your status quo, to maintain your law, etc. Now, where the Romans got it wrong was that they would take a prefect from Rome and send them out to the provinces where this person would not be received because you're coming here as this high-born, noble Roman citizen who wants to lord over us, even though you have no idea how we live. In many instances, you don't even know our local language. That's where the Romans got it wrong, and that's where, again, this sets a lot of the backdrop for around the time Jesus is starting to walk around with his disciples. Jerusalem was a province, and the people in Jerusalem were looking for a savior to save them from Roman oppression or Roman oppressive rule. That's where Rome got it wrong. Obviously, you look back into history and you want to learn from hindsight, and I believe the Bantu stance was a way of saying, right, we're going to do exactly what the Romans did, except we will not deploy someone from Pretoria to go out and lord over the people. We are going to appoint someone from within. And given the diverse cultures, it's better to then retain that fabric of the cultural identity and take someone who is from the people, who will remain among the people, and who will in effect act as your envoy between and to the people. That's what I believe was done. There are, of course, many disadvantages or many bad points to doing it, but there's also some advantages because like it or not, it also taught people to be accountable for their own culture and their own heritage. And in the particular cases of Uputatswana especially, it also gave people a sense of ownership over the land that they were effectively stuck on. And there's one thing with being stuck on being stuck on there is almost like being stuck on an island. You can either bicker about it or you can make do with what you have, which again, if you are, I forget the word now, I think the word is marooning. If you're the ship captain.
Yeah, you're marooned, yeah.
Yeah, if you're marooned on an island, right, you can swear at the sky all you want, or alternatively, you can accept your new reality and then build with what you have available. So the idea behind the Bantustans was really to maroon the people onto their designated pieces of land, which would consequently, in most cases, also be their ancestral land, and have them develop from there within those confines with someone who is appointed, who will lord over them. And of course, this is someone you can largely control. That's what I believe their purpose was, but the advantage was the language didn't die inside of the Bantustans.
That's what I said, but just not as eloquently and as deeply informed. You fleshed out my argument very well. Thank you. Okay, so what about, and then I've got something from Naledi Baron. By the way, I always presume Naledi Baron is a lady because Naledi in Tswana is star. So I don't know if that's the case, but I presume Naledi is a lady here. But what are your thoughts about culture and urbanization, the impacts of that?
Yeah, so urbanization definitely does break down culture. Firstly, this isn't said a lot, and so I'm a geography guy, and that's why I've had these similar thoughts before. But
cultural or spatial geography?
More cultural.
Okay, well that's my bag. I did that in grad school too. So cool.
Okay. So one of the things that's not talked about with urbanization is, okay, fine, we all know what it is. It is pretty much in most cases, the economic migration from rural into urban to seek out opportunities, etc., etc. But what is not talked about is how one of the reasons it happens is because there's a lack of development from where the people are coming out of. And this is something that is actually created almost by design. But at the very same time, there's an argument to say that I'm looking for the right word here, but by design, but not by intention. I'll make a simple example. So in South Africa, we have quite a lot of minerals in the ground. We're very big on mining. It is one of our chief exports, of course, all sorts of minerals from platinum group metals like gold and platinum, of course, all the way through to coal, all the way through to diamonds. The spectrum is quite huge. You can find virtually any mainstream mineral in the country. Now, what tends to happen? The mine is far out into the hinterlands or into corners of the country where not a lot of people live. But where is the actual commercial center for that mine? They'll have a site just outside of Rustenburg, just outside of Nelspruit, for example. But then they'll have offices in Johannesburg and or Pretoria. Why is that? The reason that this causes urbanization is if you're out in Mpumalanga, for example, you grew up in a community that is very big on mining, but you actually want to be an accountant. So to reach the peak in accounting in something that is very familiar to you, which would in your case may just be mining, you would then end up having to go to school, not in your town, but outside. You attain your accounting qualification, whatever it may be. Let's just call it a finance qualification. And your career trajectory, for it to reach desirable levels, is going to involve you not going back to where you're from, but leaving your town and having ambitions to go and work in the high-rise fancy office in Johannesburg for the mine that actually does mining operations back where you're from. That causes urbanization. Now, going back into your initial question of, what are my initial thoughts on it? Not only does it actually destroy the culture, but the economic impact, of moving all commercial activity to your large cities and not actually developing the area, such as I'll use the town, now the city of Nelspruit, for example. if I was in power, one of the things I would do is I would incentivize some of these mines to say, right, you are mining just north of White River. Why don't you set up headquarters, actual headquarters in Nelspruit or White River, and don't put it in Pretoria, for example. That way, someone who is going into professional services such as finance, accounting, etc., they don't have to leave Mpumalanga, where they can speak their home language to not just their family, but even people in the shop. That way, they can have that ambition of fulfilling or reaching their peak in their career inside of a place that they grew up in, inside of a place that isn't so far away from the rest of their family. And because they typically be earning a little bit more from providing such a service, that money that they earn, they can actually reinvest it unwillingly or unknowingly back into the community they're in, because that's where they would do their shopping, etc. We don't have that. And so the reason cities like Johannesburg remain the way they are is because the best people end up migrating to Johannesburg,
they gravitate
Pretoria.
to it, yeah. Well, I mean, look,
Yeah.
look, the Nelspruit has the Pumas. I mean, why would I want to go? Rustenburg doesn't have any rugby team, and there's no opera, and there's limited opportunity, that's that going along with your line there. But I think it can be done, but it's very difficult. The pool of urbanization is really challenging to retain culture. I mean, but here's another group of people. Here's a group of people, and this is a huge lumping, so people don't freak out. But Jews. A lot of Jews have retained their Jewishness, their faith, their culture in urban centers in Warsaw, in Berlin, in Vienna, in London, in Joburg, despite the fact that they were in urban centers, even though that's a people that didn't start in urbanization. They came from a rural setting as well. So it can be done, but it requires active parenting, and it requires things in your culture that are of value that you're able to hold on to and inculcate your youth. And if you can't do that, then it's lost. I mean, look, Germans have colonized the whole world. Not Germany, but Germans. I mean, America is 40% of German descent. We had a buttload of Germans show up in this country over 2 centuries and become part of the fabric of this country. But they lose their Germanness by and large. There's only a few places in America you can go that look like Germany. Frankenmuth, Michigan, that's a place you can go. But they turn into a tourist trap. You can go to Minnesota, and in the Dakotas you can see German culture. But in most of America, here in Pennsylvania, you don't see the Germanness except in a few places. And this state is overwhelmingly of German origin, and then some Welsh that came later. But you don't see it because they abandoned it, because they moved somewhere else and they adopted something else. But you can retain it. The Amish are a good example, as I said. But anyway, so there was a question here from Naledi a short while ago. Let me get to this very quickly for you, because it's for you, and I don't know the answer here. Now, this is why I mentioned that Naledi, I believe, is a lady, because I don't know if she's trying to chat you up or not. So does your lovely guest have an opinion on Adam Curtis and Professor Noam Chomsky's very enlightening broadcast? So I don't know if you know Adam Curtis, and I'm sure you know Noam Chomsky. Any thoughts on that?
I don't know them actually,
Okay.
or maybe I do and I don't realize. Maybe,
Noam Chomsky
you can help
is
me
a
out
very
here.
famous author. He's Jewish. And then I don't know who Curtis is. I don't know who that guy is. But he's somebody that Germany now loves talking to Noam Chomsky. I've never spoken to him. I think he's a bit too far left of center for me. Just saying.
Okay.
Anyway.
Yeah, so I've got homework to do. So yeah, I wish I could answer it fully, but until I've actually, at the very least, watched some of this, I'm at risk of talking nonsense, I guess.
No, that's fine. We don't have to go in areas we're not experts in, or at least acquainted with. But Naledi says, thank you so much for your kind acknowledgement. Yes, I'm female. Naledi is my honorary name bestowed on me by the South Africans I work with. Ah, okay, all right. So yeah, well, there you go. It's a cool honorary name to be given. Star, I love it. Star is awesome. I don't like it when English, when someone's Star Jones, Star Johnson. But when I hear Naledi, it just from Tswana, it works for me. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Paul Storm says, talk to David Shapiro about the age demographic of Jews. They left the old people behind. My granny always said to leave when the Jews leave and hold some gold to get to the last boat. So what you're saying is that the Jews are smarter than the rest of us. They know when to go in when the going's good. But that isn't always the case, as the murder of 6 million Jews in Europe bore out in the Second World War. So those people couldn't believe what was actually happening around them. And also, it belies the myth that Jews are all rich and tied to finance. In many countries, most Jewish people are very poor and in lower strata of society. But anyway, that's a whole other story. So you guys are on a break from Manpatria right now, but you'll be back. And I think people are missing it. I definitely have been missing this segment with, Dumo has been on. By the way, this is the first segment of Nako that Dumo has not been on. We're not going to let him forget that.
Yeah.
Now, Nzuzo has only been on one episode, but I'm tired of beating him up for that. But Dumo has missed one episode here, so we'll have to let him know. Hendo's just put the link into Manpatria's website. They're also on YouTube, folks. You can find them on YouTube. Just look it up. They do fantastic stuff. It's really cool to hear that. But so let me congratulations to you. It sounds like you've probably moved up in your employment. It sounds like you've got maybe a better position, more responsibility. At a minimum, at least you're getting to travel. So how's that going?
I think I officially don't like traveling now. So
it sounds good, but in practice, it's not. Yeah.
Yeah, in practice, it's not. I lose half my weekends to just traveling.
Oh, because you're on planes going from place to place.
Yeah, and South Africa's far from everywhere. So
yes, it is.
So there's that. I can feel my knees because of all the sitting at, this position. So I can feel my knees as well. And then for the first time in my life, about a few weeks ago, I actually felt homesick.
Oh, wow.
I felt homesick. No, not like home as in South Africa, as in home, as in Johannesburg, as in Edenvale, where I live. I felt actual homesick, and I could, for the first time in my life, identify with why, people would always miss home. So that's never happened to me. This isn't my first job where I traveled either. So again, most of this wasn't exactly new to me, but now it's just happening with greater frequency. Or maybe this is one of the things that the pandemic has done to people. You spend so much time at home that even your work was now work from home. So now when you have to leave, it's a little bit jarring. But I do get quite busy. So that's why even my online presence, be it here, be it on Manpatria, be it on Liberty and Friends with Nicklin, of course. I'm not going to say Joe.
Oh, I haven't seen you on Big Daddy Liberty in donkey years.
Yeah, I think I've only been on once this year.
Yeah.
I could be wrong. Twice at most.
Wow, that's wild. I had forgot about that. Yeah, because you were a pretty. I'm not a frequent guest on Big Daddy Liberty. He only calls me when there's something military he wants to talk about, even though I'm better informed than many of his guests. But anyway, no, I was actually just on the program a couple weeks ago, so I like to give him a hard time. But I forgot because you're pretty regular on there. But no, but you mentioned homesick. The Germans have a word for it, of course, and it translates directly in English, but also has a different connotation. Heimweh. The Heim, of course, being home, your homeland. Heim and Weh, which means sick, but also means pain. So to me, when I think of it literally as home pain, you're missing home. And I can relate to that. It's certainly, South Africans are trying to pull me that direction. I've actually spent 9 weeks of the past 6 months in South Africa, because the first trip was 4 weeks, the second trip was 6 months later, or 5 months later, and it was 5 weeks, so that's 9 weeks. But I get where that's coming from, and traveling. I've done a lot of it over the course of my career, millions of miles on planes. Before they shrank the distance between seats, and now since they've shrank it, and when it used to be fun to travel, it's not fun to travel anymore.
Yeah.
But it is an interesting experience because you got something very valuable out of it. I mean, the way you explained your visit to Tunisia, I don't know if it opened your eyes, but it certainly made you think an awful lot about what's happening back home and comparing it to a middle-income country that has no resources. South Africa should be a first-world country with massive resources of natural resources, human capital, educational institutions, but it's just a laggard. They talk about South Africa. Juju was talking, one of his speeches about South Africa as the largest economy in Africa. That's not even remotely true. After rebasing the accurate description of Nigeria's accounting of their economy, it's twice the size of South Africa's, which makes sense. There's 208 million people there. It should be. But, South Africa's economy is a laggard. It's just, and now the interest rates are going up again. It's really just depressing. I'm not trying to bum people out, but there needs to be change in South Africa. And the DA just had their Congress, and they're talking about a moonshot coalition, and some of the smaller parties like, well, we've been talking about that for a while. Why didn't you talk to us sooner? Nice of you to join the party, and we're not going to put up with your arrogance. So I'm not sure how well that's going to go, but we'll see. We'll see what happens with that. But any thoughts on that? Before we wrap up, did you actually happen to catch that DA Congress, or did you pay any attention to it?
So I didn't catch the Congress, but I pretty much could kind of preempt exactly what was going to happen, which is exactly what happened. Some of the names that were up for nominations, it was quite clear that Steenhusien was going to retain. I believe Zula didn't have opposition to her position, but yeah, it was quite clear what was going to happen. But to me, it was also quite clear that at the moment it happened, the media and the citizenry were going to turn it into a racial something.
Yeah.
Again, which is exactly what happened. And I'll be honest, it's very disappointing to see. It's very, very disappointing to see. Now, I'm the kind of guy who I don't need a politician to come to my front door for me to end up voting for them. Mm-hmm. I will proactively go and look at their policies. I will proactively do my own investigation on them and their party, and I'll make my own decision. And that's why during the pandemic, during the lockdowns, when certain parties were complaining that elections needed to be delayed because they didn't have an opportunity to go door to door, I found that ridiculous, because to me, I don't need to see them. I don't need to meet the political candidate for me to have confidence in them. But that's just me. The majority of those on the voters roll, that's maybe a bit controversial, but yeah, the majority of those on the roll are the complete opposite. They want to see the person come to their door, and they want to have the person be of a certain skin color before they give them the time of day. And that was very evident in the DA. And I'm going to be saying this a lot for the rest of this year up until the voting and up until our national elections next year. But I really do wish that people would hold the ANC to the same standard they hold for the DA.
Yep, that's what I've been saying all along. I mean, Propaganda 24 ran an article immediately after this, and they said, well, here are some of the problems. Look at the slate of leadership here. It's not representative of South Africa. And my first question was, where are your stories on News 24 about how the ANC has become almost an exclusively Xhosa and Zulu party, and there are virtually no white faces except for Barbara Creasy, virtually no Indian faces other than Pravin Gordhan, and colored faces.
Not even a woman in the top 6.
Exactly. They don't hold anyone to that standard. They don't hold the ANC to the standard that they put it was, and that's patently unfair. I mean, that's just wrong. If you're going to hold the DA to that standard, then you hold the ANC to that standard and call out their hypocrisy if you think it's hypocrisy. And they don't. They don't. I mean, I went and searched on News 24 and IOL sites. Can't find an article talking about the lack of diversity, skin diversity, not real diversity, but skin diversity inside of the ANC. And that to me is fraudulent journalism. That's not a free press. That is not the fourth estate. That's just propaganda. Yeah. That's my view.
Yeah, and the other thing as well, which one of my followers mentioned quite rightly so, is that fine, the DA has the elective conference and people are voted into positions of leadership within the Democratic Alliance. And then the media and, social commentators go on this whole charade of how there's the lack of diversity, etc. But the unspoken truth here is that those people didn't vote themselves in.
Right. And in the case of the DA's Congress, the vast majority of people who were delegates were not white South Africans. They were colored, black, and Indian who were there, who voted for John Steenhusien. And he didn't win 51-49. He won 83-17. And listen, and Pope Palazzi is a very impressive woman. She's impressive. She's talented. She's articulate. There was no reason for her not to be the mayor of Joburg anymore. That's just, a hit job by the ANC and EFF. And that's just her politics. But I mean, she didn't fail. She didn't have enough time to fail. It takes a little longer to fail than the time she had. But I mean, she's a medical doctor. I think she's maybe a forensic pathologist or something like that. I mean, she's very impressive. But they wanted John Steenhusien. And they got John Steenhusien 83-17. It wasn't even close. Not even close. Yeah. And there was, it kills me. There was no discussion in 2017, December 2017, when Ramaphosa's faction supposedly bought votes and he won by 70 votes. out of thousands of votes cast. 36 people voting for Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma, and she would have been ahead of the ANC, but for 70 votes. And there were even reports that I had to search long and hard and talk to people who were at the conference to find out that there was vote buying accused. I'm not saying, because I have no evidence of it, but that was the allegation at the time, which the press covered up. This time they covered the story, but it died very quickly. Maybe because the margin was so much greater. But the point here is that they don't hold the ANC to any standard whatsoever. None.
The funny thing is, so, most people don't know this, but I'm also a professional photographer and videographer. So I'm in those communities as well. And you meet people. And I've had a few conversations already with, guys who would be behind the camera at some of these events. Mm-hmm. And the stories you hear, this is obviously the things that weren't reported, but these were people who were there, closer to some of the core individuals than even some of the delegates. You were within earshot of many things. So, again, the stories we share amongst ourselves in those communities, even there, really fascinating stuff. I'm talking guys who were at some of these elective conferences, guys who've held the camera shooting for carte blanche, where they talk about the conversations that were had off camera, guys who handle the cameras on a contractual basis. You'd be brought in as a contractor for the SABC, ENCA, etc. Guys who are in the editing room for stuff that you end up seeing on the news. The stuff they see and the stuff we talk about there is something else. It really is something else. So whenever I hear things like, votes were bought, etc., I'm always reminded that I probably know someone who was there behind the camera, and they are going to corroborate exactly the sort of information at some point in time. So nothing is too far-fetched.
No, absolutely. And like I said, I've actually talked to a few people who were at the 2017 one, and it came up. But I haven't talked to anybody in the 2020, because, what's the most recent one they had? They just had it anyway, but I haven't. I didn't talk to anyone about that. But I did talk in the 2020 people because I had time. But it's this stuff is real on this side of the Atlantic. It's real on that side of the Atlantic. The subterfuge and the things that are happening inside of politics. But hey, so we've got a big election coming next year. We're going to wrap it up here in a second, Koketso. Give you a chance to get back to what you're doing there. But big election next year. The UIM, Neil de Beer. By the way, I covered his party's launch for the election for next year. He fancies himself as the next president of South Africa. I think that's an incredibly high mountain he's going to have to climb, but for the UIM, the United Independent Movement. But he does have a following there in the Western Cape. But he launched it, so he's the first party that I actually saw launch it when I was in South Africa. I went to the launch. I got a lot of grief for that, by the way. People attacked me. They're like, well, what are you doing? What are you doing? I'm like, well, I'm an independent journalist. I'm covering a newsworthy event. The fact that I cover the event doesn't mean I like the guy, doesn't mean I dislike the guy. But I covered it anyway. So I got a lot of flack for that from some quarters. And the good news is that some South Africans stand up for me and say, hey, knock it off. In fact, there's some very influential South Africans. Chris covers events, and you don't have to watch the events. Just because he covers it doesn't mean he's in favor of it or he's not in favor of it. Anyway, so they've launched now. I guess technically the Democratic Alliance with this Congress has launched their campaign for 2024. We'll see what comes of it. We'll have to wait and see if and when the ANC really launches their campaign, because they haven't really. Right now, they're just in reaction mode to everything that's happening. Any thoughts on 2024? Just very briefly, without getting into much detail. I interviewed Roman Kabanak, and he seems happy if it's a DA ANC coalition. He doesn't care. He thinks that just be more of the slow decline that's happening in South Africa. Other people terrified of an ANC EFF coalition. I said, as long as Ramaphosa is in charge of the party, that's never going to happen. But he might not be in charge of the party. You never know. A possibility is this moonshot that the DA is talking about, the DA and a grand rainbow coalition of smaller parties. I predicted after the 2021 elections, municipal elections, within days of it, that the ANC would not get more than 38% of the vote in 2024. That's what I said in 2021. Whether I'm right, we'll see. I'm actually inclined to think they're going to get less than 40 or less than that right now. I said 38 to 42% is their max, is their peak, and probably on the lower end. And now I'm inclined it might even go lower. But any thoughts really quickly on it's going to be like. Are we going to see parties actually get out and do things now? Not for you, because you don't need them knocking on your door, but people in Alexandria and people in Northwest need somebody to knock on their door and be seen or have rallies. Any thoughts on what we're going to see? Is it going to be more of the same, or are we going to have a chance for change in South Africa?
Look, so disclaimer, I do believe all of the professional polls that have been done that really do put the ANC at sub 50%, etc. I absolutely believe in them. But I'm also one of the most pragmatic people I know, and I will say this with full confidence that when the time comes, closer to the election, all it's going to take is for the ANC to deploy some key figures to key corners of the country, to stand in front of a crowd with a public announcement system, dance around like a buffoon, hand out a few T-shirts, and that's how the ANC is going to retain their power. Every single time. So I expect that to happen as it does, and that's how they're going to cross over the line for 50%. Not this grand coalition of perhaps EFF and ANC coming together, etc., etc. Nope. All it's going to take is they're going to send your key people, guys like your Fikile Mbalula, Paul Mashatile is the new one, Zizi Godwa as well, who's seen as a younger person and, will be propelled to represent the youth in the highest structures and offices in the land. Those sort of people, they're simply going to get sent to the places where the service delivery has been poor since the dawn of democracy. They're going to dance on stage. They're going to hand out T-shirts. They're going to bring in a few popular artists as well and make it a whole event. And then they'll end up getting over 50% yet again. So that's my honest belief.
Ouch.
I would love to be wrong. So
Ouch.
Let me put that out there as well.
More of the same.
I would love to be wrong.
More of the same is what you're bringing. Wow, that's a painful thought. What I will point out to the audience is that the ANC is already below 50%. They got just 46% of those who bothered to show up and vote, which is only about 13% of the eligible voters in the 2021 municipal election. So I remain confident they'll be below 50%. If it's how far below, and like you said, that's the problem. That's the long pole in the tent, as we say in the Army, because one pole's longer than the others and it doesn't sit right. The long pole in the tent is if they rock up with KFC, three-piece streetwise, T-shirts and banners and dance around like buffoons, they will be able to get a certain segment of the voting population, maybe some who may not have voted recently, to come out and vote for them, and that may be enough to push them up, I hope not over 50%. For me, an ideal outcome would be the ANC gets 33% of the popular vote. That would be an ideal outcome, but I don't think that's possible. But it would be nice to see, and I hope you're wrong too. By the way, Eddie now just gave a super chat, and it's his first ever super chat on the channel, so we have to celebrate that. Eddie, thank you for now. YouTube tells you when someone does it for the first time. That wasn't in the past, but extra special show tonight. Well, thanks, Eddie. You should tune into this. This was a fortnightly program, which we do it when we can. I've been gone and I was paralyzed for 2 weeks, courtesy of Delta Airlines. I couldn't move. My back was injured. But seriously, I couldn't move for 2 weeks. It was horrible. And then you've been traveling, and Dumo is out of commission for a bit. So, and Nzuzo only shows up on rare occasions, and Nolu wasn't able to come to some. But we try to do this fortnightly if possible, and we'll do it more often if we can. As long as there's at least two of us here, then it's Nako. If it's just me, then it's Night Owls, and so that's false advertising. So I won't do that. But I want to thank Koketso, Keloboa. I really enjoyed the conversation. The audience seemed to enjoy it an awful lot. Thank you, Eddie, for that super chat. And Garrett says, lace the KFC with laxatives. Then you don't need a lot more portalettes wherever your rally is at if that's happening. But anyway, Koketso, any final thoughts on anything at all we've discussed or something we haven't discussed you want to share with folks before we wrap up? Oh, before you answer, how's your mom?
Yeah.
I always have to ask Koketso's mom.
Okay.
She hosted me in Northwest. She was a great host, and she ensured that I didn't become a victim of a fake service delivery protest because they shut the road down, which meant she had to drive me all the way around the backside, around to a mountain pass and show me the way out of town, which is a fantastic lady. How's your mom before you answer? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, my mom's doing good. I'm actually seeing her in a few days, so she's coming back down to Joburg.
Please give her my greetings and best wishes.
Yeah, and she's with my dad now, so they're both retired. They're both back at the village, and they're both enjoying their twilight years. They are academics, So in between marking or, in between supervising postgraduate studies for certain students, marking papers, and writing journal papers in the case of my father, they just keep themselves busy with the garden, the animals. So yeah, my dad is more the fauna. Sorry, no, my dad is more the flora person. So lots of fruit trees, as you've seen. And my mom is more the fauna person. So yeah, they sold a few of the sheep. The chickens are still many, and there's still 2 dogs. And I hear there's a second tortoise on the property that I've never seen. But
no, I didn't see the second tortoise. I saw the one.
yeah, I hear there's a second now. So
maybe it found a partner.
yeah, so my mom does the animals, my dad does the plants. So in between everything else, they keep themselves busy with that, and they're still putting pressure on me to deliver grandchildren.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
But any last comments you want to share other than news of how your family's doing?
Yeah, I think I'm almost out of words, but yeah, I am keeping tabs on I'm trying to catch up with everything that's happening with Trump, of course. So yeah, I'm a bit behind.
Oh, he's been arrested. I don't know if you caught that.
That much I caught, yeah.
Yeah,
that much I caught. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see. And of course, timing is everything. So had he not announced his intention to run for the presidency, would they have actually, worked so hard to try get him arrested? I don't believe so. So yeah, I think this is a shot in the foot of the Democrats. But again, let them eat each other. We'll just stand by.
Yeah, no. This is a colossal strategic mistake by the Democrats. There's even CNN, Koketso, even the commentators of CNN who detest Donald Trump are sitting there going, "That's all he had. There's nothing here." He is being charged for a crime that does not exist, for things that were already past the statute of limitations. If it's past the statute of limitations, it's not a chargeable crime, and he's trying to create a crime out of multiple statute of limitation violations. So we'll see what happens, but yeah, the Trumpster, one thing about him, he's never boring.
Yeah, he's never boring, and yeah, I like how he has like this face that he pulls when he knows the cameras are on, to almost show that, it shows that yes, I'm okay, and at the same time, he intentionally tries to look indifferent about everything that's going on. So yeah, that really projects that I'm still unfazed, and we go through this together, all of that nonsense. But yeah, so I'm still getting caught up on all of that. I must say it's quite interesting to watch, really, because the reality here is that the people going after Trump, they've looked away from people who've done a lot worse.
Yep.
Actually.
Hillary Clinton.
So,
Joe Biden.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. No, you're right. They've overlooked all kinds of things. The behavior of the FBI. No one's charging anyone for violating constitutional rights, First Amendment rights of people by pressuring, cajoling, coercing, and incentivizing Twitter to silence people who ask questions during the pandemic. There's been no charges preferred against any government official, bureaucrat, or politician, despite the fact that they've robbed Americans of their First Amendment rights, the most sacred of our constitutional rights. I mean, they've looked past an awful lot of stuff, Koketso. We talk more about this the next time we get together, because I think it's an apropos topic that's not going away. But yeah, cool. Donald Trump.
One more thing.
Okay, go ahead.
One more thing. I did watch Lori Lightfoot's seething speech after.
Listen, I call her Lori Lighthead for a reason. She's gone. She's gone. I think much to her surprise, she is reviled, especially by Black Chicagoans, because the people who've suffered the most death and destruction under her reign have been Black Chicagoans, particularly in the South Side of Chicago. Thank goodness that and I'll just call her that. She's a racist. I mean, there's no way around it. No white reporters can come to my press conference. What do you call that? Outreach? It's racism.
Yep.
Yep. Anyway, Beetlejuice. That's what Hendo calls her. That's what we call her. She looks like Beetlejuice. Yikes. Look, I mean, she doesn't even have any class. I mean, she does this Christmas thing with her partner from her home, and she's got big stains on her carpet and on her couch. Could you not at least get them cleaned, or throw an Afghan on them, cover them up, have a little...
Yeah.
I mean, it's... Oh, my gosh. Just, I mean, oh, geez. Anyway.
probably celebrates what do you call that thing? Kwanzaa or something like that.
Kwanzaa, yeah. I'm sure she does. I'm sure she does.
Yeah.
But anyway, but we're seeing the fall of a whole bunch of influential and powerful female politicians around the world. First, Jacinda Ardern went. She's gone in New Zealand because she was a coward and wouldn't stand for election. Her party won anyway. So she left. Then we saw Nicola Sturgeon, the so-called "I'm taking Scotland independence," and she didn't get around to that. She's gone now.
Yeah.
And then Sanna Marin, the leftist in Finland, just lost, and she's out now. And then we see, of course, Beetlejuice is out of office now, too. So lots of powerful women around the world. I guess it's just a misogynist world. We're getting rid of ladies.
And then they should explain why Italy's prime minister is still there.
Oh, that's right. And she's doing quite well. You know, they got very quiet, because she's been effective. They don't report on her because she's effective. They only report on her
There's
if they
nothing bad to report on her.
And so everybody's forgotten about Giorgia Meloni, I think her name is. But yeah, although there is one thing of note in Italy, and that is Silvio Berlusconi, the former prime minister 4 times, the television magnate, is in the hospital in critical care. He's got an infection. He's 86 years old, so that might come across sometime soon. Is if he doesn't get out of hospital. But anyway, Koketso, as always, really appreciate it. It's a lot of fun, and I think it's very enlightening for all of us. I mean, I learned something when we talk. I hope you also learned something. I know the audience certainly learned something, so it's pretty cool. And I'm going to razz Dumo for finally missing a Nako.
Yeah. Great being on it. Yeah, it's good when we do this, and yeah, we should try to do it more often. I can only speak for myself, of course, but we can crack the whip at the rest of the squad.
Cool beans. We'll do that. All right, I'll let you drop off, and then I'll wrap up the stream. Thanks a lot, Koketso. Kia le bois. It's good to see you again.
Awesome.
All right, folks, Koketso Retsane from Manpatria right there. Let him drop off. Thanks a lot. I hope you all enjoyed this. Be sure to give us a like. I know it's getting late in South Africa, so we're going to wrap up now. It's must be 10:30 in South Africa or thereabouts. Let me see real quick. 9:30. It's not as late here as I thought it was. So thank you all very much. And you can find Koketso on social media. He's on Twitter, and he's active on Twitter, so you can find him on there as well. And you can also find him in Manpatria. And so thank you all so much. I'll be back tomorrow on this channel with the news, and if anything breaks, like in the Trump case, we'll bring that to you. Don't forget, this channel is at Colonel Chris Wyatt, and you want to go to the original channel. The original Coke is back on display. That's right, it's available at Real Chris Wyatt. Go into YouTube, type the @ symbol, Real Chris Wyatt. Just like Trump, I took a page out of Trump's playbook at Real, so that I could differentiate myself. At Real Chris Wyatt, it's over there, the original channel. I'm putting production up on that channel, and Night Owls occurs on that channel. On this channel, it's a news program and production. So thank you all so much. Appreciate it. That channel's twice the size of this one. Despite them taking away subscribers, I still have 21,000 plus over there. So thank you. Trying to keep both channels going and trying to cross-pollinate. So thank you so much. All right, guys. All right, take care. Cheers, and we'll see you tomorrow. And take care of yourself. Be safe wherever you're out there. Bye-bye.